Pride lifts my head so that I may face the strangers and loved ones who ridicule me because I'm a little weird.
It means being visible. It means letting people know who I am and being my true self, because growing up, I didn't have a lot of those role models, and I didn't see myself in a lot of people in popular culture. And so you kind of felt lost and alone. And I want to be someone that's visible.
This year, of everything going on with all the protests, I feel like we need to take pride back to its original roots of being a protest, of being a march, and not these corporate sponsors, but like highlighting these like prominent queer voices, prominent queer, Black, trans voices.
We still have to continue fighting, promoting unity, and listening and giving space so other voices can be heard.
Pride is not a luxury. Pride is essential to my survival.
Our final panel will help us look to the future. So much is changing these days: policing, popular culture, business, and the way we look at each other. What should that change look like, and what should be done to make these changes last? Joining us to discuss it are Travell Anderson, the co-host of Fanti, a podcast about our love-hate relationships with pop culture; Ashley Marie Preston, a media personality and creator of You Are Essential. That's a campaign to help people most affected by COVID-19. And Malcolm Kenyatta is a Pennsylvania state representative. His district includes his native North Philadelphia. Glad to have everyone here. And Travell, I'd like to start with you. This has been a momentous Pride Month, historic protests, a pandemic, and more. How are you personally just processing all of this?
For me, I'm just looking at how the protests that we've been seeing are actually a manifestation of the work that, our ancestors have been doing all along. I'm proud to see so many people getting out in the streets, in particular at the Brooklyn Liberation protest this past weekend, and showing that they support and they stand up for Black and brown trans folks. I think going forward, I'm interested in seeing, folks keep that same energy. I'm interested in seeing folks make sure that they're still believing and saying that Black lives matter and all Black lives matter, including Black trans lives, 2 months, 3 months down the line.
Representative Kenyatta, how do you see law enforcement's role in this push for equality and for reform? As a lawmaker, are you seeing more support from police departments, more resistance? How is that going?
There's always resistance to change, but ultimately it's our job as people who create laws to make sure we're being responsive to what's going on. And what we face here is that our structures are deeply, deeply broken. Just a week ago, myself and numerous members of the Black Caucus and some white allies, we actually staged civil disobedience within the House chamber, stopped all movement on the House floor, demanding that we actually move bills that would radically reform the way we do policing in the Commonwealth. And because of folks who for 19 days now in Pennsylvania have been out every single day demanding that we disrupt these systems that have treated folks who are Black and brown, who are LGBTQ, who exist on the margins, absolutely horribly. We know that we need big change. And, in Harrisburg, we're doing everything we can in our power to do it. We don't expect that law enforcement is going to be an ally, unfortunately, in getting it done, but we're going to push ahead nevertheless.
Representative, I should also ask you, your district in North Philadelphia is an interesting one. It includes some neighborhoods that have been really struggling for a very long time. It also includes Temple University. I used to spend some summers at Temple in a program for minority students who are interested in medical careers, because I was going to be a doctor before I settled into something steady like journalism. And it's an interesting mix. So I feel like maybe your district gives you a certain perspective about how communities can sit side by side with one another and have so much mutual interest, but still feel like there's a 50-foot wall between them.
You know what? Honestly, there is a lot of tension. I say all the time that deep poverty is the moral and economic issue of our time. And so, just as, you would hope that law enforcement would be an ally, there are moments where, the tensions are very real. And as the person who was born and raised in this district, third generation, grew up in the housing projects around the corner, but also have this deep history at Temple. My grandmother went to Temple. My dad went to Temple. And so there certainly is a balance. But at the end of the day, the folks who live in this community, who are invested in this community beyond 4 years, it's their lives that really ultimately need to be centered. And that's what I do in my work.
Ashley, how do you see the allyship of the LGBTQIA community to Black Lives Matter right now? It seems to have taken this quantum leap in the last few months.
Well, that's interesting. I don't know that it's quite a quantum leap as much as it is people not knowing that Black liberation and queer liberation are linear, and they're definitely linked. The leadership of Black Lives Matter, they are Black queer women. And so I think that one thing that we can agree on is that state-sponsored violence and law enforcement have been an impediment to our ability to thrive. And so when we have conversations around what it means to defund the police and reinvest in the communities that have been fragmented by these systems, it's a conversation that we should all be able to come to the table together and discuss. Why do you think, Ashley, that there's been that lack of awareness of who all has been at the foundations of these movements? Is it willful ignorance? Is it just what's underlying that? I think it could be all of the above. And then there also seems to be an urban myth within the Black community that somehow Black, trans, and queer folks are immune to the toxicity of white supremacy, and that we're sheltered by the politics of the LGBTQ umbrella. And so 52% of LGBTQ people of color, according to a report by the Southerners on New Ground and the Transgender Law Center, said that they'd experienced high levels of violence by law enforcement. And so as we continue to see law enforcement take Black lives with impunity and not be held responsible, we're also seeing disproportionate violence within the LGBTQ community toward Black lives. And so I think that there are people who know, and then there are some who don't know.
Travell, lately a number of companies have expressed their support of both Black and LGBTQIA rights struggles. Some have made policy changes, including the hookup app Grindr. This month, the company said it would remove a function that lets users filter out profiles by ethnicity. I think some people were surprised that Grindr even had this feature. What do you make of this? It feels like one of those realizations that, that Ashley was just talking about, that some LGBTQIA people may have about just how deeply prejudices can run within a community that claims to embrace everyone.
Well, the whole idea of kind of racial preference, racial discrimination within the LGBTQ community is not new, and Grindr has known that for as long as it's been in existence. And so I see that this particular move, it's just kind of lip service in this particular moment. They could have removed it a long time ago. We didn't need to witness, somebody with a knee on the back of their neck in order for us to be moved toward this type of movement and type of change. Companies like Grindr, who perpetuate a lot of ways, some of the systemic racism, some of the oppression that LGBTQ people of color experience within the community. There's so much more that they could be doing with the technology, with the data that they have, with the money that they have, and this particular move is really empty to me.
And Travell, it's not lost on me that there is a certain degree of fetishization, I think is the right word when talking about Black men inside the community. I mean, you know what I'm getting at, right?
Oh, very, very much so. I mean, many of us within the community, we've heard, the no fats, no femmes, right? So there's an anti-fat and anti-femme conversation to be had. There's also the no blacks, no Asians, all these other ways in which members of the community, primarily white members of the community, further otherize and further marginalize those of us who are at the intersections of a variety of identities. So like I said, it's not a new conversation, and I'm looking to Grindr, to Jacked, to the other apps to do more.
And if you're not familiar with any of these apps, by the way, and you're watching this, do not Google them. Stay pure. Remain pure. Let's look ahead to the future. Representative Kenyatta, what work are you doing to ensure the best outcome for Black LGBTQIA people come the November election? Is there one particular aspect of policy that you're focused on for the future?
So one of the things that I've really been looking at is this idea around data justice. It is often in our public policy, we all can think of moments where our public policy is actively antagonistic against folks who exist on the margins. But one of the things that I've often seen walking into committee hearings as only one of two openly LGBTQ members, as one of the youngest members, as the only openly LGBT person of color. And what so often happens is that you're not even a part of the conversation at all. And so there's been a national movement of activists and others around queering the census. And in Pennsylvania, one of the things I've been looking at is a bill that I introduced called Data for LGBTQ Lives that would add a SOGI question to all forms where we collect demographic information, a voluntary question around sexual orientation and gender identity. Because the reality is, at the state level, we collect almost no data about our community, in large part because people don't care. They don't think we should be a part of the conversation, and we're actively ignored. And so one of the things that we need to do is make sure I'm not the only openly LGBTQ person or queer person in these spaces, because what I've seen is that when we're in these spaces, when our lived experiences are in these spaces, the conversation shifts, and we need more of that shifting to attack and ultimately dismantle the structures of oppression.
And I just want to call out that acronym you use, SOGI, S-O-G-I. That's sexual orientation and gender identity, right?
Correct.
Got it. Before I let y'all go, in one sentence, if I could get from all three of you just one sentence, if you could give one piece of advice to a young Black LGBTQIA person who's watching this, who's looking to the future, wondering what the future is going to look like, what would that be? In one sentence only. Representative Kenyatta, what would you say? One sentence.
I would say that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is just be yourself. And I would encourage them to truly, truly embrace that in every single space. Ashley, one sentence, what would you say?
I would say take full ownership of the moment. Every generation has that movement that defines who they are, and this is yours.
And Travell, before we go?
I just add that you come from a long lineage of queer and trans brilliance. Embrace it.
Travell Anderson, co-host of the podcast Fanti, and I neglected to mention the president of the Los Angeles chapter of the National Association of Black Journalists. Ashley Marie Preston, creator of You Are Essential, and Pennsylvania State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta of North Philadelphia. Everybody, it has been a pleasure. Thank you all so very much. And hey, we're glad you made time for us this hour as well. Hopefully it's clearer now just how very e pluribus unum we really are, especially these days. Black Lives Matter and the LGBTQIA rights movement are both making strides, but it all begins when people connect, when we discover just how much we need each other. In his letter from a Birmingham jail, Dr. King wrote that we are all tied in a single garment of destiny. We've seen what can happen when that garment unravels. Until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. Thanks for watching.
I've been getting out every single weekend and protesting and being able to really talk about what's happening in the world and where we still need to have progress.
All Black Lives Matter mean that we should address the homophobia in our Black community and address the racism in our LGBTQ community. So it's about joining two communities together and creating that dialogue and conversation about ways that we can better each other as a human race.
That's really what the opportunity is for coalition building, and then to really take this movement to the next level and bring about lasting, sustainable change for all of us.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.